Hi folks, I'm Ben Starr, the Ultimate Food Geek. Welcome back to my messy kitchen, and today we are on part 2 of our tutorial on how to cook the perfect Thanksgiving turkey. So I've just pulled my turkey out of the refrigerator. It's been in there for 3 days, and as you can see, looks quite a bit different than it did when we put it in. I'm going to talk about that in a sec. But first I want to address some concerns people had on the first video saying, are you crazy leaving a turkey raw, uncovered in the fridge for 3 days? It's going to pollute and contaminate everything in my kitchen. Well, that's actually completely not true. Your turkey is perfectly safe to sit bare, raw, uncovered in the fridge for 3 days. A stationary turkey in your fridge is not spewing salmonella bacteria out onto everything in your fridge. But I will tell you what will spew salmonella bacteria everywhere, and that's washing your turkey or your chicken in the sink. Don't ever do that. All that does is spread any potential contaminants that are on the outside of that turkey all over your kitchen. So don't wash, and yes, it's perfectly fine for it to sit raw, uncovered in your fridge for 3 days. No worries there. All right, let's talk a little bit about timing, because it is probably Thanksgiving Day when you're going to roast this bird. Now, a spatchcocked bird that we're going to cook at a very high temperature, 450 degrees, is probably going to be done in less than 90 minutes unless your bird is over 20 pounds. Cooks a lot faster this way than a conventionally whole roasted turkey does. So you can plan on about roughly 90 minutes as your cooking window. A little bit more if your bird's larger than 20 pounds. You're also going to want that bird to sit for 20 minutes and rest when it comes out of the oven. So you're about an hour and a half there. And ideally, you want to pull your turkey at least an hour before it goes into the oven to allow it to start coming up to room temperature. This is because we want the bird in the oven for as little as possible. We want it to race to its done temp and then pull it out, because that's best for the skin. We ideally want a golden brown crispy skin, not a dark brown almost burnt skin. And that results from it being in the oven too long. So you really do want to gain 10 or 20 degrees above refrigerator temperature in the interior meat of your turkey before it goes in. So we got another hour there. We are really looking at pulling this turkey about 3 hours before you plan on eating. It's also okay for the turkey to sit out for a couple or 3 hours before it goes into the oven, because you are going to be cooking it to a food safe temperature, which we'll talk about in a bit. So if you need the extra space in your fridge on Thanksgiving morning, go ahead and pull this turkey out, let it sit on the countertop, coming back up to room temperature. All right, so let's look at the skin here. It looks really different, right? We've got almost a translucent color. We can kind of see the meat underneath the skin. We've got some of this crusty salt deposit from also that baking powder that we rubbed on, and it just is going to produce a really delicious crispy product when we get it out of the oven. But there's a couple things we need to do before we get there, and the first is to add some skin, gently pricking that skin, maybe 3 or 4 places on each breast. Don't dive too deep into the skin. You don't want to create tons of holes for juices to escape. But the primary reason for puncturing the skin here is so that we don't end up with any air bubbles that lift that skin off the meat of the turkey. That is purely an aesthetic thing. There's nothing wrong with it if it does that. It just doesn't look very nice. So we're going to give these nice little holes for steam to escape. Also, if there's any fat that kind of renders out, it can come out and kind of self-baste the skin of the turkey as it's roasting. Do a few here on the wings as well. And that is our first step. Next step, you want to rub the turkey all over with any type of oil that you have. Olive oil would be mine of choice, but any type of oil will work. Bacon fat would also work beautiful and give a really nice kind of smoky flavor to the outside of the skin. But what I typically use is actually mayonnaise. This is an olive oil mayonnaise. Mayonnaise is nothing more than an emulsion of an oil, in this case olive oil, and egg yolks. And that's going to give us a really beautiful golden brown effect on the skin. So you just want to get all that rubbed nicely in. Thin layer, it doesn't have to be very thick, but you do want it kind of all over the bird. Make sure you massage the wings and get into all the little nooks and crannies if you want that layer to be really beautiful and golden and crisp. Now let's talk for a second about stuffing, because I know there are probably some of you that are stuck with this family tradition of always having a cavity in the bird to put your stuffing into. Stuffing is and always has been a horrible idea when you bake it inside the turkey. Talk about a food safety nightmare. In order to get the stuffing to a food safe temperature on the inner cavity of a turkey, you have to completely overcook that breast meat on the outside in order to get your stuffing safe to eat. So let's dispense now for the rest of our lives with the concept of putting edible stuffing in the cavity of a turkey. Terrible idea. If you still like to use stuffing as a presentation component, bake your stuffing in its own pan in the oven, transfer it to a beautiful platter, and you can set this gorgeous spatchcocked turkey right on top of it after the turkey comes out of the oven. That's the answer to that. Now let's talk a little bit about smoke, because roasting meats in the oven at high temperature produces smoke. If you are the kind of cook that sets your smoke alarm off all the time, you're probably doing something right, because very high heat, especially when it comes to meat, is a good thing. It produces an excellent result. If you live in an apartment community or have a really hyperactive smoke alarm, one of the things you can do to mitigate the smoke that's produced in the oven is to make yourself a little roasting tray out of vegetables here. And the vegetables are going to dump some moisture into the pan as the turkey cooks and kind of help mitigate the amount of smoke that's coming off of scorched juices. Also, if you notice that there's a lot of smoke coming out of your oven as the turkey reaches its done temperature, you can toss a little bit of water into that pan as well to kind of minimize and mitigate that. All right, so I am going to transfer this lovely bird onto my makeshift rack of vegetables here. And now it is time to discuss thermometers, because there is only one way to know if a turkey is done, and it's that the internal muscle has reached doneness temperature. Gone are the days of roast at 375 degrees for 45 minutes per pound. That was never a proper way to know if your turkey was done. The only way you can know is with a thermometer. So make sure you have an oven-safe thermometer that can stay in the muscle itself. If you're going through your drawers to see what kind of thermometers you have and you find these little quick-read instant thermometers or digital thermometers, these are not oven-safe. They are meant to be inserted in there, take the temperature for 15 or 20 seconds and then remove them. They aren't particularly useful because as you're waiting for the temperature read, all of the heat is escaping from your oven and it's going to ruin your cook. So make sure, spend $5 or $8 on one of these oven-safe thermometers, or better yet, use what I do, which is a remote probe thermometer. Probe stays in there, and you'll always be able to monitor the temperature outside of the oven to know exactly where your bird is at. It's also got an alarm that will ring and tell you when the bird has reached its internal temperature. So make sure you've got a good thermometer. Do not guess. You will either overcook or undercook your turkey if you attempt to figure out that the turkey is done based on anything other than an actual thermometer reading. Now, if you're roasting in a conventional oven, you're going to want to rotate the bird halfway through cooking to ensure that it browns evenly all the way over. If you've got convection, you don't have to worry about that. But this is important because the direction that you place your thermometer is important. You want your thermometer facing the oven door as the turkey reaches its final temperature so that you can actually read it just by cracking the open the oven door and looking at it for a second. Now, I like to start my turkey with the wings pointing toward the back of the oven, and then finish the turkey with the legs pointed toward the back of the oven. That means if this is the final orientation for my turkey as it's going to come out of the oven, I want that thermometer facing this direction. All right? Now, it's important that you insert the thermometer into the thickest part of the breast. Don't get it in there at an angle where you might be contacting the bone, and don't push it to where it's only going to be a few millimeters in from the edge of the skin. You want it to go straight back and down to try to get it into the sort of geographic center of the breast. Of course, I like to use these remote probe thermometers, and they're a little bit more slender and easy to get in there. So I can get this pushed in, and now time for the bird to go in the oven. All right, so we've got our oven preheating to 450 degrees. If you have a convection oven, use that feature. That just means you won't have to rotate the turkey halfway through the cooking process to make sure it is browning evenly all over. But 450 degrees regardless of whether it's conventional or convection. And you want your rack probably in the very center of your oven. Now, because this turkey is not as tall as a non-spatchcocked turkey, you could actually put it a little bit higher in your oven if you want to squeeze another rack underneath it to cook your stuffing or roast some root vegetables or whatever. And that will allow you to kind of do a little bit of double duty with your oven at the same time. All right, let's get this baby in. All right, let's have a little adult conversation about food safety. Now, the USDA would like for you to drastically overcook your turkey, meaning 165 degrees as your target internal temperature, to be certain that the meat is safe to eat. That is their recommendation for all poultry products, 165 degrees. Well, it turns out that turkey breast begins to become dry and inedible at 150 degrees Fahrenheit. So, what's a girl to do? Turns out that really what the USDA is after is something called a logarithmic reduction in bacteria. With this factor here, 7 log 10. That translates to out of every 10 million potential salmonella bacteria that might be inside that meat or on the surface, all but 1 copy of that bacteria will be killed at that temperature. And it turns out that at 165 degrees Fahrenheit, instantly you achieve that logarithmic reduction in bacteria. But I know that there's more to the story because I can go to the grocery store and get a carton of pasteurized eggs or pasteurized egg whites. And I know for a fact that eggs begin to solidify or cook at 149 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet when you crack that pasteurized egg open, it is every bit as raw as an unpasteurized egg. Well, it turns out that there is more to pasteurization than just temperature. Time is also a factor, and you can achieve that same logarithmic reduction in bacteria at a lower temperature with an extended amount of time. In fact, I've got a little chart here. At 160 degrees internal temperature, you achieve that pasteurization rate in 15 seconds. At an internal temp of 155, it takes 48 seconds. And at our ideal serving temperature for that turkey breast, 150 degrees, you achieve that with 3 minutes of the meat being held at that temperature of 150 degrees. Well, absolutely, and of course, our temperature of the internal meat is going to be held for at least 30 minutes because after you pull that turkey out of the oven, we have another factor called temperature coasting or thermal coasting. If you pull the turkey at 150 internal, it's going to continue to go north of 155, might even reach 160, sitting outside the oven. So we really don't have to worry about leaving the turkey in the oven until it reaches that dreaded mark of 165 degrees, because we know if we pull that turkey at 150 degrees in the breast, as long as it has maintained that temperature for at least 3 minutes, it is every bit as safe to eat as a turkey that's been cooked to 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the USDA does this because they don't want to have to explain that whole timing and temperature factor to you, because most people will just yawn and glaze over. But you can rest assured, this is science. Your turkey will be safe if you pull it at 150 degrees Fahrenheit in the breast. Allow it to sit and coast. It'll go a little bit higher than that. You can be absolutely certain that you have minimized the risk of foodborne illness, even if you cooked it to their recommended temperature. All right, we are at 147.7 on our meat, so we're getting very, very close. Look how quickly this is going up. Already 148.1. The turkey has been in the oven less than 45 minutes, and we're already almost ready to pull it out. Of course, this turkey is just shy of 7 pounds once I spatchcocked it, so it's definitely on the smaller side. But this turkey is going to cook faster than any turkey you have ever cooked before, and that's because of the spatchcocking technique. All right, we just hit 150. It is time to pull out our gorgeous turkey. Oh my gosh, look at that. Once your turkey's out of the oven, let it sit undisturbed and unmolested for a minimum of 20 minutes. If it sits a little bit longer than that, that's also perfectly fine. You can carve it, put it in a pan, return it to a warm oven to reheat it just before it goes to the table. But at this point, don't do anything. Don't tent it with foil. All that'll do is redirect moisture down into that skin. Right now it's incredibly crispy and delicious. We don't want to ruin that. Also, don't remove your probe thermometer. First of all, the juices in this turkey are really volatile right now. They're moving around like crazy, almost essentially boiling inside the meat cells. So if we remove this, that negative pressure is going to allow a lot of those juices to run out onto the pan. Now, speaking of juices, take a look here. We have very, very few juices compared to conventionally roasting a turkey. What that means is all that juice is still inside the bird, so the meat's going to be absolutely delicious. In the old days, you roast the whole turkey, it's overcooked, you carve it, then you pour all the juice back on top of it to desperately try to rehydrate that meat. We don't need to do that in this case because the juices are still inside the meat, which is where they're supposed to be and where they're supposed to stay until we eat it. If you look at our temperature right here at 164.7, it was 150 when we took it out. We've coasted a full 14, almost 15 degrees. Imagine if we had left this turkey in the oven until it reached that 165 food safe temperature mark. It might coast above 180, and then the breast meat would be impossibly dry, and we would have absolutely turned out a terrible turkey for our Thanksgiving table. So this is how you know we're completely within that food safe zone. All we need is 3 minutes at 150 degrees Fahrenheit to make sure the turkey is safe to eat. We're well past that. All right, it's been 20 minutes, and I have transferred my turkey to a nice cutting board so that I can carve it. We noticed that the temperature is now starting to coast back downwards. We're back down to 160 degrees. So I know it's safe to go ahead and remove this thermometer, as most of the juices have reabsorbed into the meat. We still get a little bit coming out of that hole. The longer you leave the turkey, the less you'll lose. And now we're going to do a little bit of carving. So the first thing to do, and I've got, if you'll notice, a little latex glove here. That's really only to protect me from the heat. It's not for any other particular reason. So we're going to first remove the legs here, and you'll see that this turkey is a lot easier to carve than a conventionally roasted turkey. You can easily cut down between the turkey and the breast. It's pretty much just skin that's holding that leg on between the leg and the breast until you get to that final joint. And you'll see after you've kind of sliced all of the tissue away, you've got a little ball joint that'll kind of rotate and pop right out. Okay? I'm going to set that aside and do the other one here. Super, super simple. All right, those will eventually need to be broken down as well. But now we can go ahead and remove our wings. So I'm going to pull that wing back a little bit and stick that knife right down there in that V and give a nice cut to remove that first tissue, and then we're going to rotate backwards. And there's a joint right in there, a little ball joint. You can just rotate and twist, and most of that will come out. You can finalize getting in between that joint with your nice sharp knife. All right, wing is out there. That can also be further broken down here in just a bit. I'm going to do this other one. Cutting down into that Y or armpit. Twist it back and rotate till you can see that joint. Get inside that joint with your knife and get the meat cut. All right, and now we are down to the breasts. First thing we're going to do is you're going to cut down right alongside that breastbone with your knife. You want to stay as close to the bone as possible so you waste as little meat. But you will notice that at the head of the turkey, you've got a wishbone in there that wasn't removed. So you're going to have to run that knife right along that wishbone and just kind of keep peeling your turkey back away from the knife. And there we have that beautiful breast. Now, let me point out something. You see a little bit of purple color right here along the bone. And a lot of uneducated folks will freak out about that, thinking that it's raw. You know, the old mythological statement, cook the turkey till the juices run clear. Well, pink color inside the turkey, anywhere in the meat, especially along the bone, is a completely normal color to have. It does not mean that the turkey is raw or undercooked. This is a compound called myoglobin that exists in all tissues, and it does have a pink color, particularly when it is dissolved in water. Now, it is true that the color in myoglobin tends to denature at a specific temperature. Well, in a turkey that's fairly alkaline in nature, remember we added baking soda to raise the alkalinity level of this turkey, that hemoglobin doesn't, or that myoglobin does not begin to denature until around 180 degrees Fahrenheit, which is way higher than we would ever want to cook the turkey. So completely dispel with that old myth, and if any of your guests are squeamish about seeing a little bit of dark color, you can tell them Ben Starr educated you that that's myoglobin. It's not blood. It does not mean that the turkey is unsafe to eat. It is particularly natural for your turkey to look that way. And if your turkey is completely white when you've cut into it, with no trace of purple or red, it means you've overcooked the damn thing. Definitely save this carcass. You'll probably want to pick off all of this extra breast meat. Oh my God, is that perfectly seasoned and moist and delicious. I'm going to save that for turkey salad or soup or something like that. And you definitely want to keep this carcass to make some really nice stock with. To separate the leg from the thigh, you get right down there into that kind of joint, cut gently, separating the two cuts until you get down to that ball joint area. Open it up just a bit and it will expose itself for you. See right there, there's that bone. Now you can get in there with your knife to get between that joint and separate. Now, to remove all of the bones from your thigh meat, if you want to serve boneless pieces of dark meat, the first thing to do is that there's this long, flat hip bone on the bottom, and that can largely be removed by getting your fingers underneath it and pulling it back. You can use your knife, if you need to get under there just a little ways. And that thigh bone is connected with a ball joint to the other thigh bone, so you can remove that guy. And then you're just going to want to cut gently along the side of that thigh bone. It's going to release the meat from it, and you can pull it right out. Make sure you save that bone for stock. And now you have a nice boneless piece of thigh that you can cut into serving portions. For the wings, you can generally just separate these into two pieces with your hands. And there we have it, folks. An absolutely perfect Thanksgiving turkey ready for your table. Juicy, moist, crispy skin, and all it took was a little spatchcocking, a little salting, and a little waiting. Tune in next time for more exciting how-to videos and the science behind them. I'm Ben Starr, the Ultimate Food Geek. Happy Thanksgiving.